Hello, I am Michael Collins and this is Media Focus. In this video, we are going to be looking at how to take images and how to post-process them using Lightroom Classic. So in this video, I'm going to be going through essentially how to organize your photographs prior to even opening Lightroom Classic. And then I'm going to be going through some pretty basic kind of things that you can do with this program in order to make your images look more interesting. It's really, really important to note that I'm not going to be showing you anything that is particularly complicated or anything like that. It's going to be fairly straightforward. And also, I really need to point out that the way in which I do things is going to be completely different from the way in which you end up doing things as well. Now, there are a number of ways to edit your images after you've taken them, and I think it's really important to edit your images. So if you just have a look on my desktop right now, you can see we have an image by a photographer called Solita, and his photography is, well, he shot on 35mm film in color mainly. That's what he's most famous for. And it's very tempting to kind of think about photography, especially kind of it's just something, you know, you push the button, you click, and everything's done with the camera. And that's not actually the case, and that's never been the case. And even with an artist, a photographer like Lita, a lot of his work would be done in the darkroom. A lot of his work would be done through processing it. Now, previously, this would be done in a darkroom. You would get things like filters. You would process your images using various different chemicals. And nowadays, since most people have shifted to digital photography, this whole process has quite clearly become digital. And now we can use programs like Lightroom instead to post-process your images. And it's really important to realize that if you just point a camera at something and push the button, you're not actually going to get something which is going to reflect you. You're not going to get something which is necessarily particularly interesting. You've actually got to do things to the image first. Now, when you go out shooting, it's really important that if you do have the capability on your camera or on your phone, that you set it to a mode called RAW mode. Now, a RAW file is essentially a much larger image file, so it will take up more space on your memory card. But the advantages of a RAW file are that essentially it is a flat image with absolutely no post-processing. There's also no compression or anything like that. So when I shoot a raw image on my camera, which is a fairly cheap Sony kind of point and shoot camera, these images, rather than being kind of standard JPEG size of maybe like 3 megabytes or something like that, they ended up being roughly 20 megabytes, which is quite clearly much bigger. So the advantage here is that when you go into a post-processing application like Adobe Lightroom, that you can essentially do more with it. You can push certain colors. The images that you take might look a little bit flat and boring at first, but you'll find that you can kind of tweak them a little bit. So that's my first tip. When you're shooting, make sure that you shoot in RAW. Now, later on, I'm going to post a video just showing you how you should actually take images rather, how you can use things like ISO, focus, depth of field, all that good stuff. But for the time being, I'm going to say it doesn't really actually matter too much. As long as you're shooting in RAW, yeah, I'm going to, you know, here's a huge admission. When I shoot in the autofocus mode of my camera. And when I shoot on my phone as well, I shoot in the autofocus, the auto mode of my phone as well. I just make sure that I have the settings set to RAW. Now, obviously, some people might look down on this, but the way in which I take pictures is very much, I like to hammer the camera as much as possible to take as many pictures as possible. Now, most important thing with this actually happens before you open Lightroom. So it's really, really important that after you go out taking images that you organize your images. So I'm just going to show you my setup. So after I take images on my camera, I dump them in a folder called Ungraded Photographs. So these are all my digital images that I've been going around, and I live in a village in Cambridgeshire, and essentially because at the time of making this video we're currently in the COVID-19 lockdown, I haven't actually been able to leave the village, so I've been walking around and I've been taking images mainly of the village and also of my garden and my cat as well, which isn't particularly exciting. But what I'm hoping to do with these images is that I am hoping to do something interesting with them in post-production, and I'm hoping to make them more interesting. So the first thing I do is after I chuck my images in this folder, I like to work on them bit by bit. So I think it's really important to not, I've got 1,870 items in this folder, so 1,868 photographs. That's way, way, way too many images to process at any one time. So my rule of thumb is processing approximately 36 images at any one time. And the reason for this is that this is roughly how many images that you get on a roll of film. So I started off taking photographs on 35mm analog cameras. So basically this is the way in which my brain works. And anything more than that just gets a little bit confusing. So what I'm going to do first of all is I am going to select the first roughly 35, 36 images. So I got 35 there. But I'm just going to go in just a little bit more there. And I like to just separate things by subject. So I've got 35 images there. And just before it gets onto these images here, which is slightly different, I'm just going to cut that off there. So next I'm going to Control X. And if this all seems like, well, what the hell are you doing, Michael? This is a bit of a waste of time. It's not. All of this is going to save you so much time in the future. So I'm going to cut that. I'm going to go onto my pictures. I've got this folder here called Digital. And essentially, I have organized everything here, you might see, into different folders. And each one of these is roughly 36 images. So I'm very, very organized, and this helps me to save so much time later on when it actually comes to organizing, processing, and also publishing my images as well. So I'm going to call this folder 198 because this is the 198th folder of images which I've done with this camera. Double click on there, and then I'm going to Control V, go away. Cool. Why is it taking so long? Come on. There we go. Brilliant. Okay, so I have my images now sitting in the folder. And as we can see, let's just have a quick... Well, no, wait. We'll see them in a second. Okay? So, the program that I'm going to be using is Adobe Lightroom Classic. And again, it's important to point out that I'm using Adobe Lightroom Classic as opposed to Adobe Lightroom. This isn't really for any particular reason other than I prefer Adobe Lightroom Classic. And to be quite honest, I would recommend using Adobe Lightroom Classic. It is more straightforward, in my opinion, and it has less of an emphasis on publishing images using this program, which frankly I don't really care about. I like to do things my own way, and I want the program to essentially do as little as possible. So next I am going to open up Adobe Lightroom Classic. Now, at the time of making this video, every student at my college can download Adobe Lightroom Classic and basically any other program in the Adobe Creative Suite, or most of them anyway, for free. So this is something that you should definitely do. That's, something you should definitely take advantage of. So First thing we find, new update for Adobe Classic. I don't want that. So this is my previous session, which has just come up, and I've deleted the original images from this. I don't really think they were strong enough to actually keep around. So it says the file cannot be found. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start off a new import. Now there are two ways of doing this. One, you can go on File, and then you can go on Import, wherever that is, import photos and videos. But another thing you can also do is you can use the shortcut, which is Control and Shift and I, and then this will allow you to import a new set of images into Adobe Lightroom Classic. So I'm just going to do that now. So that's Control, Shift and I. And we'll see here it says, please select a source. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take these images. So opening up this folder, and you can see this is why I'm being so organized with this, just so that there's going to be no issues with uploading this. I'm going to Control A, and then I can drag and drop my images into Adobe Lightroom Classic. And there we go. So excellent. So at this stage, you can go through the images and you can work out what images to use and what images not to use. And I'm going to use all of them for the time being. So I'm going to click on Import Now. There we go. So currently it's importing the files in, and it will take you to this screen here. Now yours might look slightly different from mine. I'm currently zoomed right in. I'm on thumbnail mode at the moment. Let's just take a second just to talk about the process of Adobe Lightroom. So at the moment, if we look up here, we can see we are in library mode. So this is essentially the mode where you go through your images and you work out which ones you want to keep and which ones you just totally want to get rid of. After which we go on to develop. And after that, I'm going to miss out every one of these because we don't need to use them. We only need to use the library and the develop tool. So the library tool is essentially thinking about which ones we want to take through to develop. If I just wanted to go on to develop now, I could just click on develop and we could just skip this next stage, but we're not going to, because frankly, a lot of these images I don't actually want to use. Some of these images are very, very similar to one another. Some of them are a bit crap, and you might kind of notice, well, these aren't really pictures of anything in particular. These images are a little bit boring. And so hopefully I'm going to make these images more interesting through using development tools on Lightroom. So first thing is first, if I just come around here, now I've hidden these different boxes. So if you want to bring them back up again, you just need to roll the mouse over this. You can see there's an option here called Quick Develop. And if we go on Saved Preset there, you can see I've got my own. So what I need to do, click there, Control A to select everything. And mine is a little bit weird. I need to go back to default settings first. But because I do this so often, and because I've got a certain kind of image quality, a certain kind of thing that I want, I've got my own preset that I use. It's just the kind of black and white, high contrast image that I'm going for. And I call this Mike Black and White. So just click in there, let that apply, and it will take like a minute or two for it to actually apply to everything. But this will give me an indication about which ones of these images are actually worth keeping and which ones I should probably just totally get rid of. Okay, now at this stage, you're not actually going to have a preset. So what I'm going to do is I am just going to totally get rid of this preset. I'm just going to go back to default settings, which is just going to wipe everything off. Now, yeah, so what I want to do now is I want to get rid of the images which look a little bit boring, and I want to focus on the images which I'm actually going to use. So there are a number of ways of doing this. Well, really, there's only one way of doing this, and that is to remove them. And I'm just literally going to delete them from my library. These images are absolutely huge. I take thousands of images, so that's the way in which I work. I just don't actually have the hard drive space to actually have all of these images. So let's start off with these two. I'm going to be quite merciless with this. So I'm going to go on remove photographs for these ones, and I'm just going to delete these two. This one here, I'm going to remove this one. I'm going to delete it from the disk again. So what I'm doing there is I'm right clicking and then just sort of bring this up, and there's all these different kinds of things that you can do. And again, I'm just going to ignore most of them. So I'm just going to scroll through this now. If you hold down Control when you click on them, it means that you can click on multiple images at the same time. Again, I'm being quite brutal here. No, don't want that one. Do I want that one? Yeah, okay. Whichever ones do I want? Don't want that one. Do want that one. So I'm just going through this here. Which ones do I want? Which ones don't I want? These two are quite similar, so I'm going to get rid of that one there. I like these two of the bust shoulder, so I'm actually going to keep quite a few of these. I'm going to get rid of these two essentially because I've taken loads of images of this gate thing. This person's got some quite nice flowers in their garden, so I took a few pictures. Do be careful when you're out and about taking pictures. You don't want to annoy anybody. Don't actually go into people's gardens and stuff like that. But these flowers were hanging out over the road, so as far as I'm concerned, that was fair game. These images here, so we can see we've got a lot of light kind of coming through. I'm going to get rid of that one, but that one there looks like it might be interesting. Loads and loads of light coming through here. Keep all them. Bit boring, bit boring, bit boring, bit boring. And I am going to remove these 14 photographs. So now what I've got left are 17 images. So hopefully within these 17 images, there's going to be something which is interesting. There's going to be something that I actually want to do. So next, now I've selected on my library these 17 images that I'm going to be going through. I'm now going to click on Develop, and I'm going to have a go at developing these images. So first of all, I'm going to show you how to develop in color. Then I'm going to show you how to develop in black and white. And what one should I use? So as we can see on this, we've got the screen up, we've got the preview image in the middle, and you can go through down here at the bottom and you can select whatever image you want to do. So this image here is the one. Yeah, why not? I'm going to do this one in color. Now, if we then go down to the right, we can see we've got all these different ways of manipulating and changing the image in order to make it more interesting. And I'm going to be missing out on most of these. Okay, I'm going to be just skipping out on most of them, just in order. A lot of these are pretty ridiculous effects, and really I want to do something that's slightly more straightforward. So your first stage should be basic, and this is things like changing the exposure and the contrast and stuff like that. Now, the very, very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the white balance. And one of the ways of doing this is just selecting this dropper tool here, and then you select a neutral part of the image. And then what this will do, as we can see, is it will change the temperature, which essentially changes how blue or how yellow an image is. And it will also change the tint as well. So as we can see, by selecting here, it is moved the blue down a little bit. So already the image is now looking slightly more washed out. It's looking slightly colder, and that looks kind of cool. I might just experiment for just a second with bringing it down green. Yeah. One of the things to do is just don't make it too extreme at this stage. Yeah, okay, so that looks cool. So already that's now looking slightly more washed out. Next up, we've got exposure. And a really good rule of thumb when you're making images like I make images is to just pull down the exposure slightly. So this is taken on a bright day, and as we can see, we've kind of lost a couple of details. You can click here, we can zoom in. So I'm just going to pull down the exposure ever so slightly. Quite a lot, actually. Yep. So that looks good. So zooming out, we can now see the image is now slightly darker. This is kind of getting closer to the kind of thing that I want to make in an image. Next, I really like contrast. So again, I'm going to zoom in there, just again, clicking on the image, and I'm going to click on the contrast there. And as we can see, pull the contrast right up, the blacks become blacker. Pull it right down and things start to get washed out. So I'm going to pull it right up. It's slightly extreme. Pull it down just a little bit, and then, yeah, maybe slightly too much, actually. So when you're doing stuff in black and white, that is the time when you can really push the contrast. But right here, I've pulled the contrast up a little bit, and that is looking quite cool. Next, highlights and shadows. So one thing to do with highlights and shadows. So highlights and shadows is essentially we'll pick out, again, this is just another way of just, manipulating the contrast. And again, this is completely based on your tastes. I like to bring the highlights right down. So right down to like -100s. And this again is going to emphasize my kind of washed out kind of cool image. And then I like to bring the shadows right up. Or is it the other way around? So there's a couple of ways of doing this. You can do it that way. Nah. So then bring the shadows right up. So again, this is going to emphasize the contrast which I've just added to it. So this is a pretty extreme way of doing things, but this is my way of doing things, and this is what I like to do. Next, I'm going to skip white for a second, but, well, okay, white and black essentially will crush the white and black colors that we have in this image. So let's just try out black first of all. Let's push it all the way to the top. Whoa, it's now washed out all of the blacks, but pull it right down. Now it is crushed all of the blacks, and it's now very dark indeed. So let's just zoom right in again. I don't want to make it too extreme. I'm going to pull it up a little bit, just until I can start to see the details like the daffodils in the background. And then there we go. Okay. Maybe that's slightly too extreme, but, I'm going for something here. I'm trying to do something interesting. Next, let's zoom in again, and I'm going to pull the whites all the way to the top, and then just keep pulling them down and pulling them down until it's not too extreme. There we go. So this is what my image now looks like. As we can see, this has really pushed the greens quite a lot at this stage. So next we're going to look at the presence, and the presence basically refers to how roughed up the image is going to be. It's the little bits, there's the little extras, there's the little things which really make this image. The first one is one of my favorites, and this is texture. And texture will bring out various different, sorry if this sounds obvious, textures within the image. So I'm just going to push the texture right up to maximum and then pull it down to minimum. We can see, we pull it up to maximum, it's pulling out these little bits, like the bits of broken glass, the texture of the frosted glass here, the textures of that. It's a little bit too much at this stage. There we go. That's a good kind of point of comparison. So let's just pull it down a little bit. There we go. And this is now kind of making the image look a lot more impactful and a lot more interesting. Next up is clarity. Now, easiest thing to do with clarity is just to kind of show you what it does. Pull it right up, and then things kind of pop out more and they kind of seem more sharp. Pull it right down, and suddenly things kind of seem more washed out. So I'm going to pull it right up, and I'm going to pull it down until it starts to look normal. Personally, with clarity, I like to have a teeny little bit of it, but not much at all. Next up is dehaze. So if you've got a hazy image, if you've got an image which is all really kind of, there's loads and loads of sun in it and everything is kind of all smooth and kind of washed out and stuff like that, dehaze can correct it to a certain degree. So let's just show you what it does. Dehaze is much, much more extreme. And if you have pushed these right up, dehaze will get even more extreme. So let's pull it all the way down. Whoa. Okay. So look at that. It's now extremely hazy and extremely milky. But let's pull it right up. Whoa. So suddenly it is now washed every kind of haze out of the image. And now it's very, very brutal. It's too much though. As we can see, like, there's certain colors which are now being completely lost. So the best thing to do with dehaze is to use it, but then to bring it down, to bring it down, to bring it down, to bring it down to a point where things kind of start to look normal. So yeah, there we go. Right, so it's starting to look... Yeah, but that's good. It's starting to look kind of what the kind of image that I want to make at this stage. There is a lot of color in this, and probably a little bit too much color, and I want to make it slightly more washed out. So we've got these two different tools here, Vibrance and Saturation. And these two tools essentially will, if we think about saturation, first of all, so when we saturate an image, if we push it right up, it will push the colors out, the colors that you selected up here, to a massive degree. So the greens are now completely pushed out. They are saturated. And the opposite of saturation is desaturation. The opposite of, all this color is obviously going to be black and white. Let's just move it back to neutral just for a sec there. So what I want to do is I want to push the vibrance up. Oh, and vibrance is basically exactly the same slider, but less extreme. Okay, so as we can see, pull it down to the bottom, it's not total black and white. So vibrance is a less extreme version of saturation. So let's zoom right in again. There's a really colorful bit like here. I'm going to push the vibrance all the way to the top. That's too much. I'm going to keep pulling it down, pulling it down, pulling it down to about there. Cool. So that's a nice and vibrant image. But what I like to do is I like to desaturate my images just slightly. So that's obviously too much, but I'm just bringing it in until then we have that color coming in there. So slightly desaturated, but slightly more vibrant. So then we've got this nice little look there. Right, so I'm just going to close the basic window there. Next one is tone curve. I'm going to completely miss out on that one. Next one is HSL. Now, HSL stands for hue, saturation, and luminescence. And I'm going to show you what this is, but I'm not actually going to use it unless I have to. So first of all, saturation is exactly the same as saturation in basic, but you can change it based on what color. So let's just say you're looking at this and you're thinking, that is too green. There are too many greens in here. Well, what you can do is you can just pull down the green. So as you can see there, I can make the green black and white. It will differentiate between the green of the background and then this, which I guess is, probably sees this as being aqua. Yep. So I can make it so that this is the aqua bus stop is extremely vibrant, but then the green of the background is not. And I can pull everything else down. And then I can use this as a quick and dirty way of isolating a color. I don't actually want to do that, but maybe things are just slightly too green. So I might just pull that down just slightly. I'll just make the grass less green. And actually, I think the bus stop is just a little bit too... Yeah, let's just pull that down just a little bit there. Okay. Now, hue is... Let's just wait for a second. Wait for it to do its thing. There we go. Okay, so hue is pretty much the same thing. Let's just see what that does with the bus stop. So... Well, it's not the same thing at all. Hue actually changes the color of. So if you got an image and you're thinking, yeah, I hate that color. I really wish that bus stop was a completely different color. We can move around the hue and we can make it blue. We can make it green as well, which is pretty cool. And luminescence, again, is quite similar to, is that less extreme version of saturation. And then all there just brings this all open. My advice is don't get too crazy with hue. Just go out and take better pictures. Okay. However, sometimes there are certain colors in images. I mean, for example, I really don't like the color orange a lot of the time. So sometimes I like to just change the hue of orange in order to make it less offensive to my eyes. So that's the image so far, and it's looking pretty cool. And the next thing I'm going to do is this one here, split toning. Now, split toning allows you to add saturation to certain hues. And basically what this means is that you can pull out certain colors within it. And the easiest thing to do is just to show you what I'm going to do here. So I would like my shadows to be more aqua, and I want my highlights to be more blue because I can see this blue up there. Okay, so let's just try that out. My shadows are going to be aqua. I'm just going to click here, just like there. I'm going to pull it across like that. As you can see, pick out a color which really seems to suit your image. At the moment, it's way too extreme. It's just completely saturated that. So for me, that looks pretty cool there. You might be thinking this looks absolutely terrible, in which case just do something slightly different. That is absolutely fine. And I'm going to pull this right down until we get to this stage where it starts to look bearable. And I want my highlights to be blue. Yeah, look at that. And I'm going to pull this down. You can also do it here until it gets to that stage there. You can also go slightly crazy. I mean, I can pick out another color which is not even in here. So let's do yellow. Oh, actually, that looks pretty good. So I've got this kind of gold. So this is really, really making this look like some old photograph. So I'm now just going to pull that down. And then now this is giving this gold kind of tint to it. Wonderful. Now, at this stage, you might have completely messed up the colors. I mean, like this might be slightly too extreme for you. This might not be the kind of thing that you want to do. But at this stage, you might just want to go back to basic, and you might just want to change some of these things. You might be thinking, well, actually, the contrast is slightly too high or something like that. I'm going to stick with this because I think it looks fairly all right. There are other things you can also do as well. So you can add things like effects. For example, you can add grain to your image in order to make it look like an old-fashioned photograph. So whack that right up and pull the grain down a little bit. I don't know, with grain, I kind of feel almost it's cheating a little bit, that you're kind of adding a digital effect to make the image out as something that it's not. But it does help to kind of roughen up the image a little bit. So I'm going to use grain there. But I'm not going to use any lens corrections, any transforms, any effects, or any calibration, because to be honest, they're slightly pointless. But what I am going to do is detail. So there are a few things that we can do on detail, and probably the most important one is sharpening. Now, sharpening will, especially if you've got a slightly out of focus image, will help to sharpen it up a little bit. And it does so by essentially manipulating the shape of the pixels. So let's just try this out. So we've got radius, detail, and we've got the actual amount. So let's just pop the radius and the detail up a little bit. I'm going to whack the amount up to full. And as we can see there, can we see what's happening? So pull the amount right down, no sharpening, right up. And it is now much blockier. It's much harsher on this image. It's too much at this stage. So let's just pull this down to a nice kind of happy medium. It's looking pretty cool there. And this is it. This is the image that I want to make. And obviously, your kind of image might completely be different from this one. You might want to do something totally different. That is absolutely fine. But let's just say this is what I want to do. I really like this. This is, exactly my style of photography. The colors are, saturated in some ways, but then they're desaturated in others. I have sharpened it, but then I've added on kind of things like grain effects and stuff like that. It's fairly high contrast, and I've pulled down the exposure as well, even though it was taken on a bright day. And then suddenly this, I mean, let's just flick on to an uncorrected one here. We can kind of see the difference between this kind of, milky and washed out bus shelter. And then we've got this one here. So yeah, let's do something completely different now. So here is an image of a bush, and basically I want to turn this into an extremely high contrast black and white image. Or should I do that one? Should I do a nice flower thing instead? Yeah, let's do this. No, that's a bit out of focus. Actually might look quite cool. Just trying to find an image which will look interesting, will look cool. Let's do this one here. It's a little bit out of focus, but yeah, who knows? Right, so I'm now going to show you how to do my patented style of very, very high contrast black and white. By the way, okay, you're thinking at this stage, how do I save? I want to get out. You can't actually save on Adobe Lightroom. The whole point behind this program is that you don't come back to this day after day like you might do with an Audition or a Premiere Pro project. But instead you get stuff done. If I close this now, it's saved automatically. So I can open this up and I can come back to it later on. But essentially what this program is all about is it's about adjusting this and then exporting it afterwards. Okay, so I'm not actually saving anything. And the original images are still in my folder, wherever you put them. And remember, exactly the same with Premiere Pro. Once you put images into a folder or anything into a folder, never, ever move it ever again. Right, black and white. So starting from the top, going to change to black and white. I'm going to make this a little bit quicker. It's selected profile Adobe monochrome. That is completely fine. Okay, right. Let's see what actually happens here. So first of all, much like with color pictures, I like to pull down the exposure slightly to about, 52 on this one. Cool. Nice. So you can see it's not actually a particularly good image. It's slightly out of focus. I'm just literally just hammering the button. Again, that's the way I take images. Zoom in again. I'm going to whack the contrast up to maximum. As we can see, that's really, really pushed the blacks. And already, for me, this is starting to look a little bit more interesting. Pull down the highlights, pull up the shadows, then pull the dark blacks right down. And with the whites, I'm going to pull them up just a little bit there, just to kind of get something more interesting. Okay, now texture for black and white, I like to have it right up to the top, and this will really, really pull out any kind of interesting details. Okay, go away. Why is everyone emailing me? Clarity, again, clarity, if you push it right up, will give you this kind of interesting kind of feeling, but I like to have the clarity down fairly low, and this is because I tend to add quite a lot of dehaze. Push that right up and we can see that's a bit too much. It's much too much, so I'm going to pull that down just a little bit, quite a lot actually. There we go. Okay, pulling it down a little bit again. Now, because I'm doing this in black and white now, I don't need to worry about things like tone cove, but there's now a new black and white one, black and white mix. All of these things still actually have colors. It's just that we can't see them at this stage, and I'm not going to bother with that because I don't care. The last thing I do on these then is I will go on to detail, and I'm going to whack these up. Again, I like to whack these up, the radius and the detail fairly high. And then I'm now going to push the sharpening up to maximum. Ooh, it's a bit too much. That looks perfect. Cool. Now, as we can see from this image, there's only certain bits that I actually want to have in the image. There's certain bits which are better than others. And if we go right in, we can see, oh, that looks pretty cool when we go right in like that. So what I want to do is I want to crop this image. So in order to do that, you click on the cropped overlay tool there, and you can just select the size of it like that. Let's pull this out a little bit, and you can see like here, there we go, got this. So right, I think I might need to be, I'm just going to Control Z that away. Click there again on crop will then allow you to kind of come in a little bit more. I'm going to zoom right in on this. It's going to end up now looking quite, what's the correct word? I guess it's going to end up looking fairly experimental at this point. So that looks quite cool. Right, go back to basic. Push the dehaze right up and down a little bit and down a little bit. Yep. So that's cool. I'm going to pull the exposure down just a little bit more. And just a little bit up. So then that's cool. Yeah. So that is what I'm going to do with this one. Now, at this stage, you'll be thinking, wow, this is going to take absolutely ages. But actually, there's loads and loads of shortcuts you can do. So first of all, the more you do this, the better you'll get at it. Let's just change that. Yeah, the more you do this, the better you will get at it. So when you're going through and changing all these sliders, you can get very, very good at that very quickly, and it generally doesn't take me that long to do them. However, another thing you can do is if we click on copy there, you can copy the different effects and processes and stuff like that, and add in the grain and your dehaze, your texture, your clarity. And then if we just click on copy, and if we just go on this one here, and then if I hit paste, it will apply exactly the same effect to this. And as we can see for this one, it doesn't quite work. So I might just need to push the whites up a little bit more, pull down the dehaze a little bit. That looks cool. Maybe that's the kind of image that you want, straight up. I'm going to pull it in there. Whoops. Control Z undoes stuff. So if you make a mistake, we can just do that. And then, oh, that looks quite nice. It's definitely got potential. Let's whack the whites up just a little bit more. Yeah, looks cool. So just messing around with the whites there, messing around with the dehaze, going to kind of pull that down. And then we have this image which is kind of a little bit abstract. This is just an image of someone's tree that I've taken. It's slightly out of focus, but then just literally just by messing around with these aspects, I've got something interesting. So after we've gone through all of this, wait a sec, I just want to do this one just very, very quickly. So let's just, whoops, what have I done? There we go. So let's just paste this on there. That's going to be, wow, that's kind of cool. I kind of like that. So I'm just going to pull that down a little bit. Maybe the exposure is just slightly too much on that. We can see, like, just by adding these high contrast elements to your images, like, I haven't actually gone anywhere special to do something like this, but just wandering around my village, you can kind of create this whole alien landscape from where you live. I mean, I don't expect I live, I mean, you might well live somewhere way more interesting than I do. My village has got lots of, trees and, big roads and stuff like that. Let's pull that down a little bit. Yeah. Is that cool? We're getting very, very little differentiation between the background and the foreground. And I kind of like that. It's like everything is now being completely washed out. Kind of zoom in. Yeah. Let's just pull that right up to maximum. Yeah, so that's cool. Right, so at this stage, we've got these pretty pictures on Lightroom, and there's not, obviously they're sitting here on Lightroom. What do we do with them now? So you've got a couple of options. One is, well, let's just do your only option, and that is to export these images. So I've been changing 4 of these images. So this one, that one, this one, and this one. I'm going to control click. So hold down control on your keyboard and then click on all the images that you want to do. And then next you go on file and export. And as you can see, there's also a shortcut there as well, which is Control and Shift and E. There we go. Cool. So there are all kinds of options on the export thing. I'm not going to go through all of these because it's a little bit boring. Just a couple of notes to have. I like to set quality to 77. The reason I've set it for 77 and not 78 or 42 or something like that is I've researched this, and this seems to be the point where the quality gets the highest before the file size gets absolutely huge. Okay. You can also select to put the files in a particular place. So I've got things set up so it exports to the same folder as the original photograph, but then I've selected to put it into a subfolder, and then this is called best. And then basically I know exactly where the images are. So let's go on export. And this will actually my mind a little bit, because like compared to something like Premiere Pro, which tends to run fairly okay on my computer, and although it might take in some cases like an hour to export a video if there's loads and loads of stuff on it, it can take a surprising amount of time to export images. That was actually pretty quick, so my computer's having a good day today. And where did they go? So if we open this up here, we'll see we're in the digital 198, and in here there's a folder called best, and here are my images. Now let's just give these a double click. Cool, so we got that one there. I like that one. They're quite high quality, these images, so it's going to take a second for them to load. I really like that one. Yeah, these are good. Excellent. So at this stage, I mean, I'd probably want to, go back to this folder and to kind of export a few more of these images. But at this stage, you're done as far as the post-processing goes. Now, it depends on what you want to do with these images. If you're going to use them in a magazine project, then you're going to use a program like Photoshop or Publisher in order to take these images in order to kind of do more interesting things to them and to put them into more positions. But basically, my advice is for all the color grading. So color grading is where you change the different colors and make different colors kind of push them out. And for all other kind of post correction, for example, adding sharpness and stuff like that, you use Adobe Lightroom Classic. You use this program in order to change all of this. It's a nice straightforward program to use. I have completely skipped out on almost everything on this program just to kind of show you the very, very basics. But yeah, you can get some pretty interesting things from this. And, I've got to say, the images that I started off with were pretty boring and were just literally just me wandering around my village. And this is the kind of stuff that, well, there's me putting a little post. These are, the kind of stuff that you can do at home. So please do let me know if you have any questions about this. If you want to learn more about this kind of more full-on techniques, either just open this program up and experiment with it, or even better, find a better tutorial on YouTube for someone who's willing to show you the more advanced stuff. But genuinely, you only need to kind of tweak the sliders a little bit in order to get an interesting image which is going to stand out in any project that you complete in media studies. So here are just another couple of images just to kind of show you what you can get up to in Adobe Lightroom Classic, just to kind of demonstrate the power of this program and how to take images and how to make them more interesting. So I'm just going to go through these images now. And again, this is on the same walk as earlier on in the video. And all of these are just kind of really, really pushing the contrast up and kind of creating this alien landscape. These really kind of odd things, just basically from very, very basic resources that I have available. at this stage. I'm kind of experimenting more with portrait aspects at this stage. I generally tend to take most stuff in landscape. And these are just kind of very basic tweaks. When I end up publishing these images on my blog, most of these are going to end up getting deleted because essentially they're not good enough. So this is a little sneak peek into the process. I quite like that one. That was pretty good. And, you know, sometimes you just notice something like this big clump of weeds here. And, you know, it just really demonstrates, you know, that you can pick out something really, really interesting from your surroundings around you. Do think about composition. So do think about framing your image, but most importantly, take loads and loads of images. We can see from this that I take loads of images. I'm not going to keep that one. It's a little bit boring. This one's kind of fairly interesting maybe, but I don't think it will make the final cut. And then we're back to the first one there. So just like a little indication there of the kind of stuff that you can get up to in Lightroom Classic. And let's just go on to something a little bit more. Let's kind of take a look at some shots of some streets actually. So a little bit of street photography, which, you know, you will not be able to do obviously because you are locked down at the moment, but just, you know, a little indication of the kind of stuff that you can get up to. Again, using the same principles. So again, these are kind of shot in and around Cambridge. I don't think I'm going to be using many of these. Some of these are pretty out of focus. Some of these, you know, aren't particularly well composed and stuff like that. I've really, really pushed up the contrast in some of these shots of the colleges and stuff like that. Again, it's a really, really good. So I've zoomed right in on that one because I found a particular detail, that woman's hair, that I like. Although, to be honest, I probably prefer that one on the composition there. So sort of using the crop tool. And that's the third version of the image. You can see the full image there. So we see some people there. It's completely legal to take pictures of people in public. They might not like it very much, but it is totally legal. She spotted me. She might be slightly annoyed. I've really pushed up the whites there on that one. It's kind of a cool one. It's obviously got the tree there to kind of pull up the, you know, the differentiation. Kind of like these ones here because I've really, really pushed up the whites and the blacks as well at the same time to the point where, you know, we've lost a lot of detail there. So the grass itself is just this big white void. So it's kind of cool. These people were having a little play fight there. So I took some images of them. I didn't really notice. So yeah, there's some kind of, I like this one here, this close up of the woman's hair. Again, I kind of achieved that by getting in fairly close. It's kind of cool thing to do if you notice people taking photographs and stuff like that. And when we're out of lockdown, it's a good idea to go to very crowded places, for example, markets and stuff like that, where you can really get in there and take pictures of people where perhaps they don't know that you're taking pictures of them. Again, seems slightly creepy and slightly dodgy, but you know, that's what street photography is all about. And as long as it is in a public place and as long as it's not in a private place, like for example, a train station or a college, you're not going to get in any issues there. Just be cool about it. Really, really zooming in there. I can really push the contrast there to get some interesting effects. That shot sucks. This is a cool one, just, you know, really, really pushing up the blacks. Nice bright day, so got something cool there. The detail on this one's really interesting. You know, we got a nice contrast there. Got the market there. Scroll through there. She doesn't like having a picture taken, but what can she do? Zoom in a little bit there. There we go. And it's really interesting on this one. You know, we can see the various, I've really pushed out the various crags in her face and stuff like that. And again, I'm not actually getting too close though. I really like this one. This kind of portrait of this guy, you know, really pushes out the features. We've got a nice composition on that slightly different version of the shot there. So yeah, got some interesting ones there. So yeah, my advice is just take as many images as possible.
really, because you never really know what kind of stuff that you're going to end up with. This is just me just walking out of a market, and I think I ended up getting a really good shot there. Maybe I should zoom in a little bit more. Nah, I really like the composition on that one. So this is the kind of stuff you can do. I mean, I've got a fairly nice camera, but it's definitely not top of the range. It is, pretty small. It's the Sony RX300s. And I'm just using it in total auto mode, and then just shifting stuff into black and white in post-production, and then just pushing the contrast right up, and that is essentially it.